The morning after my daughter-in-law's baby shower, I called my solicitor. His name is Bernard, and he's been handling my affairs for 19 years. He picked up on the second ring, which he always does for me, and when I told him what I wanted, there was a long pause. "Sylvia," he said, and then stopped himself. "I'm sorry. Are you absolutely certain?" I told him I was. He said he'd have the paperwork ready by Thursday. I hung up the phone and stood at my kitchen window for a while, looking out at the backyard. The lilac bush my late husband planted the year our son was born was just starting to bud. It does that every April, reliable as anything. I thought about how Terrence would have handled the previous evening. I decided he would have said something. He always did. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Sylvia, and I am 63 years old, and I have spent the better part of 4 decades doing things people told me I couldn't do. When Terrence died, a Thursday morning in February, black ice on the highway, gone before the ambulance arrived. Our son was 11 years old, and I had $42 in a checking account and a mortgage on a house in Kitchener that was worth less than we owed on it. I had no degree. I had some credits from a community college program I'd abandoned when I got pregnant. I had, as my mother-in-law at the time so helpfully pointed out, no real prospects. What I had was a cleaning business I'd been running part-time out of our basement. 3 clients. A second-hand van with a busted heater. And the kind of stubbornness that people call resilience when things work out and pig-headedness when they don't. Things worked out, not right away. Not for a long time. The first 5 years after Terrence died, I worked 6 days as a week, and my son was raised partly by my sister and partly by a wonderful woman down the street named Dot who watched him after school for $40 a week and never once made me feel guilty for not being there. I still send Dot a card at Christmas. I still mean it when I sign it. By the time my son finished high school, I had 12 cleaning contracts, mostly commercial. Offices, a dental clinic, 2 small apartment buildings. I had paid off the Kitchener house and bought a second property, a duplex in Waterloo, that I rented out and slowly renovated on weekends. I drove a used Civic and I wore the same winter coat for 6 years, and every extra dollar went back into something that would make the next dollar easier to earn. My son knew I worked hard. He saw that. But I never told him exactly how hard or exactly what it had built into. Some parents do that. They lay it all out. "This is what I sacrificed. This is what it cost me. Look at what you owe." I never wanted to do that to him. I wanted him to grow up knowing he was loved, not indebted, so I kept the details to myself. I paid for his university. I helped him with his first apartment deposit. I showed up when he needed me and I stepped back when he didn't. He grew up fine, I thought. He became a civil engineer. He bought a condo in Mississauga. He called on Sundays, most of them. And then he met Natasha. Natasha is very beautiful and very certain of herself, and she comes from a family in North York that has strong opinions about the order of things. Who belongs where, who has earned what, who is and is not worth a person's time. Her mother, Claudine, is the kind of woman who asks what neighborhood you live in before she asks your name. The kind of woman who says things like "we summer in the Muskokas" as a complete sentence, as if summer is a verb that only certain people are allowed to conjugate. My son loves Natasha. I believe that. I have never doubted it. And Natasha, in the particular way of women who are used to getting what they want, is genuinely fond of him. What she is less fond of, I noticed early on, is me. Not in an obvious way. Natasha is too poised for Azias. It was in the way she'd reroute conversations away from anything I said, the way she'd introduce me to her friends, and then drift to the other side of the room before I could finish a sentence. Small things, the kind of things you notice and then feel a bit small for noticing. I told myself it didn't matter. She made my son happy. That was the thing. The baby shower was held at Claudine's house in Don Mill. Claudine's house is the kind of house that has a name. Not a number on the door, but an actual name, in wrought iron letters on a stone pillar at the end of the driveway. I have never understood this about certain people, the need to name their houses. Terrence and I always just called ours home. I arrived with a gift I had spent 3 weeks making. It was a quilt. Not a kit quilt. Not something from a craft store. A proper pieced quilt, hand-stitched, made from fabric I had collected over 20 years. Offcuts from a blouse I sewed when my son was a toddler, a flannel shirt of Terrence's I could never bring myself to throw out, fabric from the curtains that had hung in our first house, a square from the baby blanket my own mother had knit for me when I was born. I had arranged them in a pattern my grandmother taught me when I was young. In the center, I had embroidered the baby's name. They'd announced it was a girl, and her name would be June, in a soft yellow thread. It had taken me 3 weeks of evenings. My hands had ached some nights. I didn't mind. I had wrapped it in tissue paper and tied it with ribbon, and I brought it to that house in Don Mills feeling, I'll admit, a little proud. Not of showing off, just of having made something real. The shower itself was beautiful in the way those events are, when someone with money and no imagination has planned them. Everything coordinated, nothing personal, a pastel palette that matched the napkins to the centerpieces, to the favor bags. There were perhaps 30 women there. I knew none of them except Natasha's younger sister and my own sister-in-law, who had driven down from Barry to be there. We sat in Claudine's living room on chairs arranged in a large circle, and Natasha opened gifts one by one while someone beside her took notes and someone else collected the ribbons. The gifts were what you'd expect. A Pottery Barn crib set, a Boogaboo stroller, the expensive one, the one I'd looked at and quietly set down, a cashmere receiving blanket, a gift card to a spa for after the baby arrived, a monogrammed diaper bag. Claudine herself gave a silver rattle that she said had been in the family for 3 generations, and there was a round of appropriately impressed murmuring. Then Natasha reached my gift. She pulled the ribbon, unfolded the tissue paper, lifted the quilt out. For a moment, she just held it, looking at it. I watched her face, and then Claudine leaned forward from her chair across the circle and said, in a carrying voice, the kind of voice that doesn't need to try to be heard, the kind that simply assumes everyone wants to listen. Oh, how quaint. Did someone make that by hand? Natasha looked up, she said. Claudine tilted her head. There was a small smile on her face. Homemade, she said. That's very thrifty. Somebody giggled. I'm not sure who. I didn't look to find out. Natasha folded the quilt back into the tissue paper. Not carefully. Just folded it quickly the way you fold something you're setting aside. Thank you, she said to me, without quite meeting my eyes, and then she reached for the next gift. My sister-in-law, who was sitting 2 chairs to my left, reached over and squeezed my hand once, hard. I sat with my hands in my lap and my back straight, and I did not cry, because I am 63 years old and I have buried a husband and rebuilt a life from nothing, and I will not cry in Claudine's living room over a quilt, but I felt it. I want to be honest about that. I felt it somewhere deep, in the place where the effort lives. 3 weeks of evenings, Terrence's flannel shirt, my grandmother's pattern, June's name in yellow thread. Thrifty. I stayed for another 40 minutes, because I am not the kind of person who makes a scene. I ate a small plate of food I didn't taste. I said goodbye to Natasha and told her I hoped she felt well. I hugged my sister-in-law in the driveway and she said, "Don't." And I said, "I know," and we left it at that. I drove home on the 401 in the dark, and I thought about Terrence, and about the lilac bush, and about the fact that my son, who had been there, who had stood near the fireplace with a glass of juice and watched his wife fold away that quilt, had not said a single word. Not one word. That was the part I kept coming back to, in the days after. Not Claudine's voice, not Natasha's quick refold, not the giggle I couldn't identify. My son. Who knows where the fabric from that quilt came from? Who wore that flannel shirt of his father's once, years ago, when he was cold and missing Terrence, and I hadn't said anything? Just let him wear it. Who knows what 3 weeks of evenings means when I spend them on something he knew? And he said nothing. I drove home and I sat in my kitchen for a long time, and I thought about what I actually had, and what I had always assumed I was building it for, and whether those 2 things still lined up. I had been busy for a long time. That is the honest accounting of my adult life. I had been too busy building to stop and look at what I was building toward. I owned at that point 7 properties in the Kitchener-Waterloo region, and 2 more in Hamilton. The cleaning business had grown into a facilities management company with contracts across southwestern Ontario. I had a financial advisor named Brendan who sent me quarterly reports and occasionally suggested I might consider retiring, which I found amusing. I was not wealthy in the way that Claudine would recognize. But I was, by any reasonable unnamed house, but I was by any reasonable measure, comfortable. More than comfortable. My estate was at the time split 3 ways in my will. A third to my son, a third to a small foundation I'd set up that funds bursaries for mature students returning to community college, and a third held in trust for any grandchildren. I had written it that way when my son got engaged, thinking ahead. I sat in my kitchen, and I looked at that will in my mind. The way you looked at something you've been carrying for so long you forgot you were carrying it. And then I went to bed. And then I woke up the next morning and called Bernard. I want to make some changes, I told him. What kind of changes? I told him. His pause was the kind that means he is choosing his words carefully, which Bernard always does, which is one of the reasons I've kept him around for 19 years. Sylvia, he said. I'm sorry. Are you absolutely certain? I was. What I wanted was this. I wanted my son removed from the will. Not punished. I want to be clear about that, because this is not a story about punishment. I wanted the portion that would have gone to him redirected. Half to the bursary foundation. Half to the fund for June, my granddaughter, held in trust until she is 25 and administered not by her parents, but by an independent trustee of my choosing. I wanted June to have something that was hers, fully and completely, with no one able to fold it away quickly and reach for the next thing. Bernard said he'd have the paperwork ready by Thursday. What happened next is the part I didn't plan. I had not told my son about any of this. Not the properties, not the company's scope, not the size of what I'd built. That wasn't a strategic decision. It was just how I'd always operated. I don't talk about money. Terrence and I were raised the same way. You don't discuss it, you just do the work. So my son knew I owned the house and maybe the duplex. He knew the cleaning business existed. He did not know the rest. He found out because Natasha's father is a commercial real estate broker, and he ran my name about 6 weeks after the shower, apparently trying to vet me in some belated way, and what came back was not what anyone a Sunday, which was normal. But his voice was different. Mum, he said. I didn't know. I said, know what? He said, any of it. The properties, the company, all of it. I didn't say anything for a moment. Outside, the lilac bush had fully bloomed by then. It was May, and the backyard smelled the way it always does in May, and I had a cup of tea in my hand that I didn't drink. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. I thought about how to answer that honestly. I didn't think it was the point, I said. I didn't build it so you would know about it. I built it because your father died on a Thursday morning in February, and I had $42 and a son to raise, and I didn't know what else to do. He was quiet for a while. The shower, he said finally. The quilt. Yes. Mum, you should have. I agreed. I kept my voice level. I wasn't angry anymore, is the thing. By May, I wasn't angry. I was just clear. There's a difference between those two things, and it took me some years to learn it, but I know it well now. I talked to Natasha, he said. She knows she was wrong. Claudine? I don't need an apology from Claudine, I said. I don't have any particular feelings about Claudine. But you need one from me. I've already got one from you, I said. Just now, that's done, he exhaled. And the will? That's also done, I said. And not undone. Another silence. June, he said. You left something for June. I left something for June, I said. It's hers. It will always be hers. I heard him swallow. The quilt, he said. Natasha still has it. She wanted me to tell you that. She kept it. She didn't. It's not folded in a closet somewhere. It's in the nursery. She put it in the nursery. I didn't know what to do with that information. I sat with it for a moment. I'm glad, I said. And I meant it, which surprised me a little. My son and I have been finding our way back to each other since then. In the careful way you navigate something after it's been stressed, it's not fixed. It may take years. I understand that some things, once bent, take a long time to straighten, and some stay a little curved forever. I have made my peace with curve. What I know is this. I drove home on the 401 in the dark with Terrence's flannel shirt in a quilt being folded away, and I felt something close. Not broken. I want to be clear about that. I have been broken, and I know what that feels like, and this wasn't it. This was something smaller and more specific. The feeling of having offered something real and watched it be called thrifty. I have spent my whole adult life doing things that looked small from the outside. Driving a second-hand van, wearing a coat too long, spending evenings with fabric and a needle when I could have bought something wrapped in boogaboo packaging. None of it looked like building anything from a certain angle. But you don't build anything from the outside. You build from the inside, in the evenings, with your hands hurting a little, with the television off and the house quiet. June will know that. Not because I'll explain it to her. I spent years not explaining it to my son, and I see now there was a cost to that silence, though I don't fully regret it. But because when she is 25 and the trust opens up, there will be a letter from me inside it. I've already written part of it. And in the nursery, I'm told there is a quilt. In the center, in yellow thread, her name. I made that. And it's still there. That's enough. For now, that's enough.